Well, good evening. For those of you who are interested, can you hear me? Thank you very much for letting me take part of your evening. I want to say two things as a preface to the thoughts I'm going to share with you. There's tons and tons of people who've had an impact on my life here at the Arlington Police Department. And a huge majority of those folks are here in this room. But it's important always to remember who was your first field training officer. So whenever I have a chance to sit down with police officers that are part of the Arlington family, I always remember to say that Mark Funderburk trained me and set me on this journey that I have taken. Mark, thank you. The second thought I want to share with you is that this presentation is not about Mike Heidingsfield. This is my chance to share a journey with you. And to those of you who are my fellow comrades in arms who are here in the room and served in Iraq or Afghanistan before, during, or after I did, this is a tribute to your service, and God bless you for your patriotism. This is just one man's story. I had the kind of unique opportunity to experience what I talk about as the four legs of the stool of the terrorist attacks on America. My first experience being at the Pentagon when I was mobilized after 9/11, and that's where we'll start this journey. Then I went to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to Camp Delta, a notorious place in the eyes of many people in the United States and in the eyes of the media. And I can tell you firsthand what it was like to walk the ground there and to walk the ground among the detainees who had brought this monstrous attack to us. And then I had the chance to go to Iraq for 14 months, even there finding friends among foe, Jerry Kendrick, who I found in the midst of the Green Zone one day, and a short tour in Afghanistan. So this is just my chance to show you what the war on terror has been like for one person. I hope in some small way it resonates with you. It's just the journey that I had the privilege to take. Jerry Carroll's been kind enough to run this for me. I will tell you this, there are some very graphic photographs in here. There are some very troubling images. I'm going to talk to you about the deaths that I saw and I experienced, because I think it's important that if you're going to walk this journey, you understand that what was embedded in that walkway that we all took overseas. For me, this started on 9/11. I was mobilized after the attacks of September 11th. I went to the Pentagon. What an extraordinary experience to get to Washington and see the Pentagon ablaze and watch what had been the greatest military command center in the world almost brought to its knees. And with each passing day, if you're familiar with the Pentagon, the south parking lot became a rescue and recovery area, and the north parking lot became a debris mountain. So every 24 hours, as they moved debris out from the point of impact, that mountain got larger. And the effect and the consequences and the scale of the attack grew larger in our eyes. And here's one of those small ironies that takes place. I'm going up an elevator in the Marriott Hotel where they're billeting only military and law enforcement people, and who walks into the elevator with me but one of our own colleagues from back here, John Slover, who used to work with the ATF, and he is there on behalf of the ATF, and I hadn't seen him in probably 20 years. But the enormity of the attacks of the Pentagon is where this started. I spent 4 months there. We lived in a bunker 12 hours on, 12 hours off. They told us terrible things about Washington. They said, perhaps you can't wear your Air Force uniform because you'll be targeted. In our capital city in America. They said, perhaps we're going to have to arm you every day so when you come and go, you can defend yourself against terrorist cells that we think are embedded in the District of Columbia. An extraordinary impact on somebody who's been in Washington and never experienced those things. But those 4 months passed. We planned an air campaign in Afghanistan. We planned the protection of other Air Force facilities, and I eventually got demobilized. So we come to the next slide, Jerry. And about 18 months later, I go to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, a notorious place and the first site of the detention facilities for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda detainees. And they asked me to go there to work as part of a team to assure that these detainees could be successfully secured and protected. So we went and did that. This is Guantanamo Bay. Next slide, please. This is the original building where the Military Tribunal Commission was going to convene and hear the cases of the detainees. Next slide, please. This is an overflight. If you've never seen Cuba and you've never had a sense of Guantanamo Bay, it's a rocky volcanic island. This is the camp. The concern was, what happens if a hurricane or some natural catastrophe strikes the island? Will the detainees be freed? And secondly, what if there is a Marine-launched assault to free them from the camps? Next, please. Our conclusions were that there was probably no place in the world that these detainees were more safe and more secure. Here's the irony. With all the criticism we've heard about the treatment at Guantanamo Bay, I can only tell you one person's experience. But I walked that ground 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and several things were very clear. One, the detainees lived in better conditions than the Army military police who secured them. That's one. Two, the level of risk to those Army military policemen was so high that they had to remove their name tags because Al-Qaeda had a sophisticated communication system inside the camp that allowed them to transmit information about their captors and send it back to the States and threaten the families of those Army military policemen. So let's not be fooled about what may be said in the media regarding this. I walked the halls and the rooms of the interrogation centers. Now, I'm not privileged enough to have been part of all of that, but I can tell you, I never saw one incident of abuse, and I'm always asked that, and I will tell you unequivocally, never saw one incident of abuse. And conversely, would share just one more example. Next slide, please, Jerry. We went to extreme lengths to create an environment that was suitable for these detainees, including giving them air conditioning in their high-security facility and in the medical center, which all of them sought to go to, giving them a Quran and prayer beads, and actually painting on their cot an arrow that showed them the right way to face so that they could fulfill their need to pray. Their response to that was that we must have corrupted the Quran that we gave them, and that we most assuredly pointed them in the wrong direction intentionally for their prayer time, which was obviously not the case. Next slide, please. And then I went to Baghdad. I got there via the State Department, who called and said, would you go and be the senior police executive to lead the retraining of the Iraqi police service, then intended to be a force of 165,000 people? Now, here's the backdrop. We had, as a matter of foreign policy, decapitated the Iraqi police service and thrown essentially everybody out of it. So we had no organization to work with. There was no corporate memory. There was no institution whatsoever. So we started from the ground up. And it was horrendously difficult. Next slide, please. Next. We were billeted in a place called the Baghdad Hotel, which was in the red zone, not in the green zone. The Department of State had secured it for us. What we didn't know at the time, but we learned immediately, was that the force protection needs that had to be employed trumped any responsibility we had for training the Iraqi police. So we spent, we think in retrospect, 70% of our time protecting ourselves or defending against attacks, and 30% of our time rebuilding the Iraqi police, because that was just the nature of the mission as it turned out. Next slide, please. Next slide.